He has also been Assistant Chief Technical Advisor for the HP Forest Ecosystem Climate Proofing Project funded by the KfW Bank Germany. Sir, we are very fortunate to have you among us. I would like to introduce the uh, audience. We have primarily the field functionaries of Wildlife Wing, the officers of GHNP. We have classes of rainforest officers from different states who are undergoing training at HP Forest Academy, Sundarnagar. And also the link has been shared to the public in case there will be anyone, they may also be joining. So today, the topic that has been chosen and that has been decided uh, to be spoken by the learned speaker is becoming climate resilient. As we know that these are the times of climate change, and how do we cope up with this climate change, especially with relevance to the forestry and wildlife sector. Sir, this is a very brief introduction about the participants and your own good self. Now I would request you to take the stage, sir, and enlighten us about the climate resilience and how do we take up this challenge in the future, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mandota. It is privilege for me to be here and address this gathering online, which doesn't happen very often. So I am happy that essentially we are going to be part of this celebration of the World Heritage Site, which is the only natural World Heritage Site in HP, and I think in the northern region as well. So it's a great honor, and I would like to share that when the intention to declare the national park, the Great Himalayan National Park, it wasn't called GHNP at that time, but the intention to declare a national park in that area, when that happened, I was lucky enough to be associated, and I had just joined in wildlife at that time, somewhere in, I think, March 82. I had just come from Lahore, and then this process started, and um, there were several studies. There was a group who went around. I think Dr. Sanjeeva Pandey will be able to tell you more. I hope he's online just now. Anyway, he will tell you the history in more detail. What I want to convey is that I have been associated with GHNP right from the beginning. And later on, wherever I worked, wildlife, and later as Chief Wildlife Warden, we could do several things together, and finally bring the national park to a point which was essentially Dr. Sanjeeva Pandey doing, that it got considered and finally nominated as a World Heritage Site. So, very briefly, that's the story and my association. I haven't walked in the park as much as I would have liked to, but I have gone around to several places over the years, and I can share with all of you that if there is one wilderness, the least touched wilderness in the Northwest Himalaya, it is the Great Himalayan National Park. And therefore, it becomes very important, critically important, to preserve the wilderness of this area. And it's not just the Great Himalayan National Park, the notified park, but there are a number of protected areas surrounding this park, which are designated as wildlife sanctuaries or I think national parks. And we'll come a bit to that later. But essentially, they were to make one much larger area called the Great Himalayan National Park Conservation Area. And the sooner that happens, the sooner it gets notified and recognized, the better it is for preservation of the diversity which is represented in this absolutely unparalleled wilderness in our region, and also get to more serious work. Now, my topic is actually it's about what do we do. We are aware that climate change is hitting us harder and harder every few months. You've seen the floods in Assam last week. You must have read and heard about them. And it's all these, there's some cyclone brewing up somewhere. There's a prolonged drought in parts of the world, even on the Indian subcontinent. So we are getting into the thick of climate change. And on our level, on wherever we work, especially connected to forests, wildlife areas, national parks, sanctuaries, it becomes very important that we do what we can do to become climate resilient. Climate is going to hit us, it is hitting us, and it is going to hit us harder. So the sooner we become climate resilient, in the sense we learn to do what we can do, and also new things which we haven't done as yet, the better we'll be able to, what they say is, go through the storm, which might actually last a very long time. So becoming climate resilient, you understand all this, but let me spell it out a little more. It's essentially understanding, adapting, changing to become. Climate we know is changing. I hope the PP is visible to everybody. Is it, Manotra?
Yes, it's visible, sir. It is visible, sir.
Yeah. So people can read it too, no?
Yes,
Can
sir.
they? Or
Yes,
they're
sir.
too
They can
far.
read, sir.
Anyway,
Yes, sir.
so essentially what is happening to the climate is a result of global warming. You're all familiar with that, why it is happening, how long it's been happening, and so on and so forth. Now, the third word is resilience. Now, let us understand and be clear that resilience means our ability and capacity to change. Can we change? A lot of us, once we get fixed after a certain age, fixed in our outlook, in our attitudes, in our worldview, we find it very difficult to change. And resilience essentially implies that if you want to survive, you learn how to change and to change again. And change is on various levels. It is individual, it's in groups, professionally. This is important for us. For the Forest Service to change professionally, socially. So, for instance, changes in social behavior are essential if we are to keep our environment livable. Example, not throwing garbage around, not littering. Now, this is social behavior, but as you know, it is one very difficult thing to bring about change in social behavior. But essentially, it springs from individuals. If we don't litter as individuals, we don't litter as groups, there is a hope that there'll be a shift in social behavior. So, climate change, let's be clear, we are all familiar with different and various aspects. Can I shift this up? Yes, it's better here. So, what is happening? We said essentially climate change is happening because of global warming. And what is global warming doing? The temperature is rising. The temperature is growing up. And that's affecting climate. It's affecting weather in such a widespread and consistent way that it's actually changing our climate. Everyday weather, when it's put together over 1 year, becomes climate. So we have rising temperatures, as a result of which we have dryness, droughts, recurring fires, vegetation shifts. We have erratic rainfall, snowfall. And again, because of higher and rising temperatures, there is more and more snow melt. There is a big threat that the glaciers in the Himalayas might one day actually vanish. What is known as the third pole, which is the biggest source of fresh water in this world, the third pole, the Himalayas, might actually have no water. So these are very scary scenarios. There is change in the nature of our streams and rivers. You must have heard many rivers have become seasonal, which were once perennial. There is a drying of springs all over the place. Springs are drying. And this has major implications for life in the hills. We have extreme weather events. I just told you about that flood in Assam. Last week, it's an extreme weather event, and they're happening more and more often and with greater intensity. So, what is it that you see as a result of this rise in temperatures, increased dryness? We are seeing, if you look around, you see water ponds are drying, which essentially means there is a water problem for wild animals. Wild animals, especially in the hills and the plains also, depend a lot on ponds, small lakes, water bodies for water. And if these start drying, animals are in big trouble. There is moisture stress. Vegetation, of course, is affected on a very wide scale. There is high leaf fall. There is drying and dying of springs. We keep hearing now in Himachal, for instance, it's quite common to hear that so many springs have dried up. So many springs have died. They have some dry up seasonally and restart after the rains come. But there are other springs which have gone dry more or less permanently. Forest fires, you all know about. They are getting more extensive, they are getting bigger. And the huge threat now in Himachal, for instance, is that these fires are going to extend to different forest types. They might actually go into deodar forests, fir and spruce forests, where we've never had fires before. Himachal, you know, is a state of, or has been claimed to be a state of hydroelectric projects. Its hydroelectricity is one of our big economic assets, source of a lot of money that comes into the state. And there was a time when every little stream, every khad, you know what khad is in Himachal, had a plan to put a hydroelectric scheme. Because of climate change, because of the effect of climate change, less snowfall, higher melt, prolonged dryness, the water regimes in these streams have been affected, in some big rivers too, with the result that the installed capacity of many hydroelectric projects is not fully utilized because of water fluctuation and lower base flows. We have intense wet spells, um, resulting in flooding. Landslips are a major issue now, and a lot of damage to trees. These wet spells are often accompanied by high velocity winds, and there's huge damage to forests, to trees. What also happening is, are there any questions? Anybody wants to ask anything? You're welcome to please raise your hand and ask at any time, or if something is not clear, you can please say so. So we carry on?
Yes, sir. We can take questions in the last in case they have any.
All right. As you
Right.
wish, but sometimes if you need clarification while I'm talking, even that is all right.
Right, sir. We have unmuted all of them in case they have got any query. They can raise directly also.
Yeah. Okay. So you also know that when climate changes, when rainfall changes, when droughts happen, when there are huge floods and forest fires and big disturbance to ecosystems, it has an effect on the natural life cycles, on the feeding and breeding patterns of wildlife. It has been recorded now, very well recorded all over the world, how rising temperatures have changed phenology, the flowering of trees and plants and all sorts of vegetation, early flowering, very early flowering, which is asynchronous with other breeding and feeding patterns of wildlife. And there's a huge disturbance with the result that everything from pollination to seed production to effect on populations of all sorts of wildlife, insects, birds, everything is happening. We know about it in a generic way, but our documentation is very poor. It's very kind of anecdotal. It's not it's not systematic, and that is one issue which we are going to come back to. Very important. You've been told, and we've also noticed their vegetational shifts along elevation gradients. Trees are moving up the gradient because of high temperatures. A classic case in Himachal is apple. Apple in the Kullu Valley, for instance, where you are, where the GHNP is, uh, apple was growing pretty well right down till the valley, till the river. And I think in the last few decades, it has moved up. It has moved up a lot. There is no apple really in the Kulu Valley, lower valley now. People have switched to other things. There's no apple. Apple is now in the mid and higher hills. So he is a very classic. There's a short documentary film. I think it's called The Weeping Apple Tree or something. I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe it's in your library, Manotara. You could show it to people. It's about it's about actually the impact of climate change on Apple.
Right, sir.
Okay, so now we have hopefully an idea of what's happening at different levels, in different degrees, and to different extents to our forests, our vegetation, our wildlife, our ecology because of climate change. So the next question, is there anything anybody want to ask at this point? Okay, I'll carry on. So the next question naturally is, what do we do? What to do? So we know what is resilient. Becoming resilient means our capacity and our ability to change with the changing climate. So what do we do? What are some of the practical things we can do? So I did a bit of reading here and there, and the good news is, let me share the good news. The good news is that most of the methods and tools that are needed are already known, and many are used by foresters and wildlife managers. We know it's not that they are unknown things what to do. Most of the things we know. What I also learned that it's important to do whatever we've been doing differently. Now, this is very important. We have been doing many things in a routine way, which is also to do with our training, the way we are trained, the way we are supervised, the way we are told to do things, not to do things. Now we are looking at doing things differently. Now, this doing things differently starts with a very fundamental change which we need to bring about. It's individual, it's local, and it's institutional. And this change has to do with documentation and databases. Like I said, we are doing many things. We know that climate is affecting a lot of wildlife out there. So are forest fires. But our documentation is very poor. And because of that, we do not have very good databases. For a database to be good, we need extensive documentation. And for a database to become dynamic, to change season to season, we need more and regular documentation. So please get this straight that if we are going to do anything about bringing climate resilience, even individually, particularly institutionally, you cannot do it if you do not have good documentation and databases. So if you are going to tackle anything, you got to first look at its database. What do you already know? What is your documentation? Now, databases, while computers and Wi-Fi connectivity and so on, access to internet are, of course, basic and important, but let us appreciate that databases develop when you use them. We have some databases in the forest department, I know, and I hope they are more used now. But I remember for our time, we had databases like files which were put on the shelf and forgotten. They were never really used in our day-to-day work. And that is one reason why databases don't develop. So, to change, let's start using data. Let's start using data, whatever we have, and it will automatically start growing. Your database will start growing. So, I put an example here. There's a website of the GHNP. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but Mandota, certainly you have seen it. I know you've contributed also. But this website, needs to become sort of more dynamic. There needs to be a lot more input into it. So, for example, there are hundreds of people visiting GHNP, and there are many groups, and I'm sure there are thousands of people accessing the website globally. But from the little I know, there is very little relevant information pouring in, and there is next to no feedback. There is no feedback on the website, which is in a way a reflection of what's happening to our database. A website is essentially a database. It's telling you so many things, past, current, and it's dynamic and what is changing. So this is just an example. Okay, what do we do on another level? Just to repeat, we've got to start documenting, recording, handling, using data. Unless we do that, you can forget about doing anything vis-a-vis climate change, anything worthwhile. Okay, the other thing is that I know there is huge divergence between protected areas and forests. Forests are viewed on a very, very different level and non-seriousness, if I may say, compared to protected areas. Protected areas are far more, at least intentionally, far more serious areas than forests. So what can we do? We can bring more and more forests under protected area categories. There are different categories. One of them here is the community conservation reserves. I've highlighted this because we have very few of them and we could have hundreds of these under the protected area network. And they are very important because the word community gets attached here. So wetlands. Wetlands, for instance, right now are nobody's baby. With the result, they're all being disappearing, being encroached, and so on and so forth. But wetlands stand nowhere in terms of legal protection. They're nothing. They're Shamlat land or this or that or some degraded UPF or anything. But legally, they have no protection. The wetlands need to come under some sort of protection, some sort of protected area category. Wetlands are so important when it comes to responding to climate change. We can document in Himachal, in Kullu, for instance, not just around GHNP, but in other districts and other parts. And there are a number of high altitude water. I'm told that this water bodies, according to some documentation, Himachal has over 80,000 water bodies. But we only have 92 wetlands. This is as per our own record, state record. Now, I don't know if you where 80,000 and where 92. And so there's a lot of work waiting to be done here. Okay. So when we document these water bodies, we just don't document and forget about them. We have to put in a system of at least some sort of periodic monitoring. Somebody has to go and look at them again and again and document whatever might be observed or what changes might be taking place, which is the first step to building a database. So that when you get transferred and go away, the next fellow who comes gets a database, gets some documentation which already done and doesn't have to start from scratch. Okay, notifying eco-sensitive zones around protected areas, although there's a law, but this is politically riddled. Nevertheless, Forest Department, the wildlife wing particularly has to keep hammering at this. And we've got to get these eco-sensitive zones just to protect our protected areas. So we need a lot of protection for protected areas. You see where we've come? Okay. I've already mentioned about amalgamating all these wildlife areas surrounding GHNP. This is also a requirement, by the way, when the World Heritage Site was notified. It is laid out there that GHNP will be extended and consolidated by incorporating the good forests, wildlife sanctuaries, other national parks surrounding. Okay, the next big problem we have is forest fires. Forest fires. Okay, so you can read this essentially, but let's understand that forest fires, the forest department can actually do very little about forest fires. The people who can do something about forest fires is the forest community. The forest dependent people. People living around and inside forests. They are the key players if we are going to handle forest fires in any consistent and sustained manner. So, what is the experience of involving people? What is the experience? If I ask this question, I will get anecdotal replies because there is no documentation and there is no database. There will be no institutional response. We actually don't know. We don't have experience of involving people. Somebody might have one or two ideas or examples, but that is not institutional response. So you get the point I'm trying to make. That if we are going to make progress on involving people, you've got to have documentation. You've got to have good documentations. There are examples where people have been involved in Himachal also, and it has produced good results. Even around GHNP, I remember there was an experiment, and for several years in those panchayats or areas of these groups, there were no fires. Something had worked out, but then it fell by the roadside because, as I said, no documentation, no database. The next people who came along didn't bother. In 2, 3 years, it was all forgotten. And now I don't think we even have any record. Another important player besides people is community-based organization, NGOs. Do they have a role in fire control, firefighting, fire management? How do we get them on board? How do we get them involved in this whole business? Hopefully, there'll be more talk on this when we have the on 25th or 26th when we have the the talk and panel discussion. So we all need to think, we need to read, we need to research, we need to find examples all over the world. How have people been doing something about forest fires? Okay. And then, of course, basic thing, water. Because of climate change, the big thing that gets affected all over is water. I've already told you, but what can we do about water? As I said, first thing is document. Again, we should have good georeference documentation of water bodies in and around the Great Himalayan National Park. This has to be on proper georeference Google Earth or whatever sort of maps you can get hold of. The same thing about springs and spring sheds. We know that springs are dying and they are drying, and each spring has a spring shed. And this needs to be delineated, marked, georeferenced on maps. That's building a database. If you're going to do anything about springs, you better have them recorded, documented on maps. Similarly, a lot of the drinking water in Himachal comes from springs or water sources within forests. And what is happening to these water sources and therefore to drinking water schemes of the irrigation and public health department, nobody really knows. And I think this is the forest department's baby. Because I think in times to come, everybody is going to have to pay for this water if they want water. And who doesn't want drinking water? We are headed into that sort of time, and we change, we anticipate, and we'll change better. We'll become more resilient. Okay. There was a time when a lot of forest rest houses had these weather stations, recording snowfall, temperature, rainfall, or at least snowfall and rainfall. But that has sort of fallen by the wayside over the years. But I think it's very important that throughout our forest areas, particularly our protected areas, we need a network of weather stations. Now they have automatic weather stations where all what is recorded is automatically relayed to some computer somewhere. And I think this can easily be networked with the Indian Meteorological Department, and we can actually in a few years be sitting on a very, very important, useful, locally relevant weather, snowfall, rainfall, temperature database. And as I said, if we have this sort of database for reference in whatever we do, I think we'll be working better. We'll be working a lot better. And differently, as I said. And that's what needed to become resilient, to work differently. So we work better. Of course, in infrastructure, there are a lot of other things Wi-Fi connection and range office level. There are many computers have already come in, but more laptops are needed. One thing is that we have nurseries, but many of our nurseries need very good upgradation to become multi-species nurseries and be able to supply regularly planting stock, quality planting stock across not just the entire state, but across all sorts of users. My own feeling is, and very strong feeling, that a lot of villagers do not plant trees in their lands today because they are unable to get any trees. Whenever I have had 10 or 20 trees outside my house wherever I've lived, 10 people have come and asked, sir, can you give us one tree? People don't get trees. How are they going to plant? You expect a villager to walk 10 kilometers to some nursery, and when he goes there, there is nobody there. He can't even get one tree. You expect people to plant trees like that? So we have to make trees reach the people. Another important thing is solar passive buildings. We make a lot of buildings, but I think we've got to get into this idea of making solar passive buildings. There are very good examples from Ladakh now, for instance. In Leh, they have done a lot of work, pioneering work on this. And Himachal should be one state, not just government, but a lot of private buildings should be solar passive. They help save so much energy and firewood. Okay, I've told you this that I think it's our job to make all these trees, useful trees, reach villages and villagers. And I think there'll be a tremendous response in planting, caring, and actually making those trees grow. There are schools with eco clubs, through NGOs, volunteers. We can involve children on a very, very big scale in a systematic way. Um, there are PRIs who now have MNREGA and a lot of other funds for water, for repair of ponds, for desilting, making new ponds, so on and so forth. And if we can liaise with them, if we can work with them, we could take up things like, large scale contour trenching in degraded forests, which will have a major impact on moisture levels and on production of grass in our forests. And grass, half the economy of Himachal runs on grass. Unfortunately, it's not acknowledged. But if you go anywhere, the top priority of all villagers is grass. Where to get grass throughout the year? We can contribute to that. Springs, I've already told you. There is an example in Palampur. It's called the Bohal Spring. This Bohal Spring. If the class ever goes to Palampur, I'm sure they'll be shown this. But it's an example where the municipality of Palampur is actually paying money to this set of villagers for maintaining, preserving, protecting the spring shed of the spring so that there is regular and improved water supply to Palampur town. Okay, bioengineering species, I'm sure you'll be told about it in your training, but basic thing to understand is that when we do soil and water conservation work, which we will do and do a lot, and all of you will do a lot throughout your life. Please use more plants than stones. That is what it means. Use more plants than stones and cement. That is bioengineering. A lot of things can change if we start doing that. Okay. Now, we have said what we can do. There are many things we can do. There are many things, as you have seen, what I have said is we are all doing in our own different ways. Here and there, we are doing, but it's not getting systematic, it's not getting institutionalized. And also, to be able to do these things, for instance, document and develop databases, we need new skills. A lot of us, all of us need new skills. It's not just the forest guard and field staff. Right to the top, everybody needs new skills. Especially the older officers need new skills to handle data, to analyze data, to make sense of data before they take decisions. So we all need skills in a big way. As you can see, a lot of these skills have to do with documentation, with data, data analysis, making use of data. So, for instance, there is now this thing called Google Earth. I'm sure all of you know about it, and maybe many of you have used it. And you can make these KML files where you can show your work, whatever you're doing on the ground, on a map. And you can even use that map for monitoring, for review, for planning, for a lot of other uses. But we've got to learn, we've got to know how to do these things, not one or two people per division. We need to learn this in hundreds, hundreds of guards, hundreds of other ranks need to know how to handle these things. Google Earth maps, make KML files, do necessary documentation, interpretation, whatever. Training in use of MS Excel is very important. We all know about it, but we don't use MS Excel. There are very few of our data. If you look at range level, I don't think MS Excel is used at all. Although I personally think 90% of range work, all written work in the range, 90 to 95% can be done on MS Excel. You don't need to make huge files and write letters and this and that. Everything can be done on MS Excel. But we've got to get trained and we got to start using it and doing it. There are other issues very important where we need training is engaging with community and public. Forest department, as you know, is weak on community engagement. And whatever we do and whatever we want to sustain, we can only do by meaningfully engaging with the community, with the public. So instead of a weakness, the forest department has to make this a strength. We call it interpersonal skills. This has to become a strength. How to engage consistently with people and in gender sensitive ways. Very big stakeholders and players in natural resources are women, natural resource management and protection. And we've got to be gender sensitive. We've got to understand. We've got to make sure that as a team, as a staff, as a department, we become gender sensitive. So, although this might sound very disconnected with becoming resilient to climate change, I am trying to tell you that to be able to do things, we need all this. To be able to start to do things and to be able to keep doing things, which is actually institutional strength. This is what we need to learn. This is what we need to practice. Okay. Then there are many things we do in the forests, which, in terms of resilience, uh, we can think about, we can introduce or start doing better. So, one of the things I already mentioned is that if we do staggered contour trenching in our degraded forests on a very big scale, under our soil and water conservation budgets, or under any projects or schemes or MREGA or whatever you can lay your hands on, I think it's have a tremendous impact on making forests resilient to various negative impacts of climate change. Just simple contour trenching. No, nothing big, no big deal. All we need is how to lay out a contour, an A-frame, and then to dig trenches. That's it. Okay. There are chill forests are a major, very vulnerable to forest fires, but there are a lot of degraded chill forests now. There are a lot of blanks, and we've got to have a systematic campaign to fill up these blanks and plant chill forests with other and especially broadleaf trees. We've got to make them into mixed or try to make them into mixed forests to become less vulnerable to fire and in the process far more useful to people. Okay, so the other issue is climate change is invasive species. Now, as forests degrade, as there are more fires, as there are more blanks, all these areas are going to get invaded. Lantana, for instance, is spread everywhere, and where it hasn't, it is just waiting to get in. And not only that, with increasing temperatures, lantana is also going to climb the elevation gradient. It is going to get into the other forests, fir and spruce forests, all sorts of forests, oak forests. It might even get into alpine grasslands. So we have a huge issue here on our hands. Again, as I said, Forest Department has been treating lantana for over a decade now, but we need systematic documentation, what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and a database on handling lantana. So that the next set of people who go after lantana are already informed, well informed of previous experience. We grow nurseries every year, huge numbers, they're increasing every year. And fortunately, we are increasing more and more, using more and more vermicompost. So we can get vermicomposting, I think, is a potentially a very big, we say, it's a very big opportunity for villagers to take to. Of course, the forest department needs to guarantee purchase, buying. I hope there is still some time left. Oh, it's not. Time is over. You weren't telling me. Okay, okay. But so is, I think, our presentation. Here, there are some ideas of using, for instance, forest-based enterprises, your pine needle-based briquettes. A lot of work is being done, has been done. Your bamboo for construction industry, bamboo for handicrafts. Ecotourism is a big subject in itself. And so far, it's been bad for forests and worse for protected areas. But we got to turn this around if we're going to make it useful. PES, as I mentioned, PES is payment for environmental services and hydroelectric projects. Here's a big area. Himachal has a policy and guidelines on this. But how much is working or not working, we don't really know. Medicinal plants, everybody's been talking about. Again, status studies needed. Database, documentation, what has happened, what works, where, who are the dependent communities, what are the species, what is happening to the status of these species, and so on and so forth. All database again. So finally, whatever initiatives or action or resilience we might take has to be on dynamic, good databases and documentation. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir.
Yes. Any questions and so on?
I think floor is open. If there are any questions,
हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं. Any language you feel comfortable with, please ask.
पहले अपना इंट्रोडक्शन दे दीजिएगा, फिर बताइएगा, है ना जी?
जैन सर. Yes sir, Abhishek from Forest Academy, Sundarnagar sir. Sir, my question is that currently a scheme is going on, Amrit Sarovar project for water bodies. Sir, how the forest department is taking the proactive effort in village areas? I think forest department is only concerned about the forest areas. Sir, am I audible, sir?
आपका आवाज आ रहा है.
Yes sir, yes sir. Sir, my question is that Amrit Sarovar project is for village areas for water bodies. So how the forest official are concerned about that water bodies, sir? I think here the department is lagging, sir.
Okay. So
Yes,
can
sir.
you
So
please
how can we take the proactive effort in these areas, sir?
can you repeat that briefly?
Yes, sir. My question regarding water bodies, sir. Some water bodies in village areas regarding Amrit Sarovar project. Yet, but forest department official is not concerning the water bodies in village areas.
Yeah. So okay, fine. So if I understand you correctly, you are asking what do foresters have to do with water bodies outside forests? That's what you're asking? Is that right? Mandotra? Is that the question? Or it's more?
हाँ जी सर, ये बिल्कुल सर, ये यही जानना चाह रहे हैं कि जो अमृत सरोवर एक स्कीम है जिसमें इन्होंने जगह जगह पर वाटर पॉन्ड बनाने हैं।
अच्छा अच्छा।
और ये कह रहे हैं कि जो गांव के आसपास या गांव में जो लोग वाटर पॉन्ड बना रहे हैं उसमें वन विभाग जो है कुछ भी काम नहीं कर रहा है।
हाँ, ओके, well that is unfortunate, बट मैंने भी ये अमृत स्कीम, ये जो अमृत सरोवर है, इस स्कीम के बारे में अखबार में ही पढ़ा है, मेरे को ज्यादा पता नहीं है, मगर ये स्कीम जो थोड़ा बहुत मैं समझा हूँ, ये डेप्यूटी कमिश्नर्स और कोई रूरल डेवलपमेंट डिपार्टमेंट या इंक्लूडिंग पंचायती राज, उनके थ्रू इसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने की बात हो रही है।
Yes, sir.
Then the water
I have
bodies,
question that can the forest official take proactive approach in these areas?
नहीं देखिए, होल्ड ऑन, जो तो स्कीम में भाग लेने वाली बात है, वो तो तब होगी ना फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट की, जब हम उसमें पार्टनर बनेंगे।
Yes, sir.
फिलहाल हम नहीं हैं, तो ये स्कीम तो और विभाग के थ्रू इम्प्लीमेंट हो रही है।
Yes, sir.
मगर जो आप क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं,
Yes, sir.
उसमें एक बड़ा मुद्दा है, और बड़ा मुद्दा है वाटर बॉडीज का, चाहे वो फॉरेस्ट में है या नहीं है।
Yes, sir.
जब हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात कर रहे हैं, तो क्लाइमेट चेंज सारी वाटर बॉडीज को इफेक्ट करेगा। फ्लड आएगा या रेनफॉल की कमी होगी तो सारी वाटर बॉडीज इफेक्ट होंगी।
जी जी।
और अभी जैसे हमारे हालात हैं, अगर हमने फॉरेस्ट के अंदर ही अपनी वाटर बॉडीज को देख नहीं पाए, बचा नहीं पाए, कायम नहीं रख पाए, सस्टेन नहीं रख पाए, इम्प्रूव नहीं कर पाए, तो हम बाहर लोगों को क्या बताएंगे या क्या कर सकते हैं?
Right, sir. Right.
क्योंकि और कोई डिपार्टमेंट नहीं है जो इससे इस तरह से जुड़ी है जैसे फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट जुड़ा है।
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
ओके,
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
जी, थैंक यू, गुड, फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, यस, एनी मोर?
Good morning, sir. Sir, my question is regarding that. जब हम एनवायरनमेंट की बात करते हैं तो हमारे सामने डेवलपमेंट एक दूसरा पहलू भी है। तो सर, जब हम जिस प्रेस्टीन एनवायरनमेंट हम हैं, जैसे हिमाचल प्रदेश जैसे स्टेट में है, और जहाँ पर इतना हाई वेजिटेशन है, और डेवलपमेंट की जब बात आती है, अगर कोई रोड कंस्ट्रक्ट होती है या फिर किसी नेशनल एरिया से पास करती है, तो डेवलपमेंट वर्सेस एनवायरनमेंट की डायकोटोमी के लिए सर बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस क्या है? कि अगर एज अ फॉरेस्टर हमारे सामने से इश्यूज आते हैं, कि हमें ऑर्डर आता है कि हमें यहाँ से रोड पास करनी है और सामने चैलेंज है एनवायरमेंट डिग्रेडेशन का, तो हम कैसे डील करें और दोनों में कैसे बैलेंस रखें? एनी व्यू सर?
ओके, मंडोत्रा, कुड यू प्लीज टेल मी ब्रीफली व्हाट, क्या करना है?
सर ये जानना चाह रहे हैं सर कि जो इन्वायरमेंट वर्सेस डेवलपमेंट का रहता है सर हमेशा से एक मुद्दा।
पता है,
तो ये कह रहे हैं कि अगर प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया या फॉरेस्ट के बीच में से यदि कोई रोड निकलता है तो उससे काफी ज्यादा डिग्रेडेशन होता है। तो ऐसी स्थिति में हमें क्या करना चाहिए और ताकि वो डैमेज कम से कम हो या बिल्कुल ही ना हो? क्या मैं सही पूछ रहा हूँ?
यस सर। यस।
ओके, यही है क्वेश्चन,
यस सर।
यही पूछा है आपने या कुछ और भी है?
यस सर, बस यही पूछा सर।
ओके, देखिए, प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया में सड़क बनाना या कोई कैनाल बनाना या ऐसा कुछ करना जिससे बहुत गड़बड़ होती है, डिस्टरबेंस होती है, बहुत हमारे लॉज के तहत काफी मुश्किल काम है, और खासकर प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज में। स्टेट वाइल्ड लाइफ बोर्ड है और इंडियन वाइल्ड लाइफ बोर्ड है, जिनको ये अप्रूव करना होता है। मगर देखा गया है पिछले कुछ सालों में एक कोशिश है कि ये जो हमारे लॉज में प्रोविजंस हैं इनको थोड़ा डाइल्यूट कर दिया जाए, ताकि सड़क और अन्य जिसको हम बोलते हैं विकास के काम करने आसान हो जाएं प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज में भी। तो ये तो एक पॉलिसी मैटर है, सरकार के हाथ में है। मगर एक बात जरूर है कि जहां भी इन लॉस को डाइल्यूट करने की बात हुई है, वहां पे सारे देश में काफी शोर मचा है, काफी लोगों ने अपोज करा है और अभी भी अपोज कर रहे हैं। मगर फिर भी कई कई चीजें हैं जो करनी पड़ती हैं, जिसका कोई ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं है। कई चीजों को डिफेंस की इम्पोर्टेंस दी जाती है, तो इसलिए वो करनी जरूरी समझी जाती हैं नेशनल इंटरेस्ट में। हमको यही देखना है कि जो कंडीशंस क्लियरेंस के साथ मिलती हैं, जो भी ऐसी क्लियरेंसेस होती हैं उसके साथ ढेर सारी कंडीशंस आती हैं। जब क्लियरेंस होती है 10, 20, 30, 50 चीजें होती हैं जो उस कंपनी को या कॉन्ट्रैक्टर को या एजेंसी को या गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट जैसे पीडब्ल्यूडी है उसको करनी होती है। जैसे कि पीडब्ल्यूडी कहीं भी मलबा नहीं फेंक सकती सड़क बनाते हुए, ये क्लियरेंस का भाग होता है कोई भी सड़क की। मगर हम देख क्या रहे हैं कि जहां मर्जी मलबा लोग फेंकते रहते हैं, जो उनके ठेकेदार होते हैं। पीछे आपको अखबारों में आया था डीएफओ कुल्लू ने एक बड़ा भारी फाइन लगाया नेशनल हाईवे अथॉरिटीज को, जिन्होंने ऐसी सड़क से वो डंप कर दिया बहुत सारा मलबा, बड़ा फाइन लगाया है। तो ये एक बड़ा अच्छा उदाहरण है। मगर ऐसे बहुत कम डीएफओ हैं और ऐसे बहुत कम लोग हैं जो एक स्टैंड लेकर खड़ा होते हैं और इतना इतना ऐसे फाइन ठोकने की हिम्मत करते हैं। ये हमको करना है एज ए डिपार्टमेंट, हर एक लेवल पे करना है। मैं आपको एक छोटा उदाहरण दूं, फॉरेस्ट के गार्ड और फील्ड स्टाफ, डेप्यूटी रेंजर रेंजर को पावर है कि कोई भी अगर जंगलों में कूड़ा करकट फेंकता है, सिर्फ माल मलबा नहीं, कूड़ा करकट गार्बेज, आजकल सारे में गार्बेज फेंका जा रहा है, हमको पावर है उसको चालान करने की और फाइन करने की। मगर कितना कर रहा है हमने, कितना करते हैं? आपको पता है कुल्लू मनाली जैसी जगह में कहाँ जा रहा है गार्बेज? अभी हम टूरिज्म की बात कर रहे थे, टूरिज्म के साथ एक बहुत बड़ी चीज जुड़ी है, वो है गार्बेज, जिसकी कोई बात नहीं करता। आज कोई नाला नहीं ऐसा है जो प्लास्टिक की बोतलों से और लिफाफों से भरा हुआ नहीं है। और हमारा वो फॉरेस्ट एरियाज हैं और हमारे पास पावर है उनको चालान करने की। तो मैं ये इसलिए हाईलाइट कर रहा हूं कि चाहे वो सड़क बनाना हो प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया में, जंगल में, या ऐसी चीजें हो, हमको खड़े होके अपना जो पावर है वो तो इस्तेमाल करनी होगी, तभी आप सोच सकते हो कुछ इम्पैक्ट होगा। जी। और कुछ? हाँ, 1 घंटा तो हो गया ज्यादा हो गया एक्चुअली। आई होप इट wasn't too boring. Ask the people, was it any good? What do they say? उनको अच्छा लगा, मजा आया, समझ आया, कुछ कुछ तो फीडबैक दें। पूछिए।
कोई किसी तरह का फीडबैक देना चाह रहा है कि क्या उन्हें इस बारे में समझ आया, क्लाइमेट रिजिलियंस के बारे में? अभी मुझे लगता है वो फॉरेस्ट एकेडमी वाले जो हैं उनका इंटरनेट भी शायद छूट गया सर।
ओके ओके,
राइट सर, सो बिकॉज द
अगर
क्लास इज
टाइम हो
नॉट
गया दे
विजिबल नाउ।
मस्ट हैव गॉन। So is there anybody
राइट।
else who was watching and would like to say something? Anybody else who was watching from wildlife?
यस सर, हमारे फॉरेस्ट के फील्ड फंक्शनरीज हैं।
Yeah, please
मनोज, आप कुछ बताना चाह रहे हैं?
let them come on the screen.
मनोज, गेरू राम, बॉबी शर्मा।
Jain sir, this is Menka Thakur from GHNP.
हाँ जी, मैंने कहा बताएं।
सर बोल रहे हैं ना कि मतलब कैसा था जो क्लाइमेट से रिगार्डिंग, तो मतलब काफी अच्छा था, काफी चीजें सीखने को मिली। फिर इसमें ना सर का एक क्वेश्चन था बीच में किया था कि जब हम जो विलेजर्स है, जो लोकल पीपल को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं ना सर, वो जो फॉरेस्ट फायर को प्रिवेंट करने में, तो फिर हमने भी अभी ऐसा किया था अपने एरिया में। तो फिर जो मैंने वहाँ पर ऑब्जर्व किया, तो उस वजह से मतलब जो मेरा एरिया है वहाँ पर इस साल फायर सीजन में एक भी केस नहीं मिला सर फायर का। तो फिर जब हमने उनको जो ये अथॉरिटी दी थी, तो उन्होंने ना इसको बहुत ही पर्सनली ले लिया। और जब हम ऐसा जो मैंने ऑब्जर्व किया ना सर, उसमें ऐसा था कि जब हम लोगों को ये अथॉरिटी देते हैं ना, अब आग लगाने वाले भी लोग ही होते हैं, गांव वालों के बीच से ही होते हैं। तो फिर जब हमने उन लोगों को ही बोला, वहां के लोगों को ही बोला कि आप ही सब कुछ है, अगर कोई ऐसा कुछ करता है उनको पोस्टर दे दिए। फिर उन्हें ये बोल दिया कि अगर आप में से कोई कंप्लेंट करता है या कोई केस पकड़ता है, तो हम उसको कुछ इनाम वगैरह देंगे, रिवार्ड देंगे। तो फिर इस वजह से वो काफी अवेयर रहे। तो फिर ना ही कोई उनमें से जो होता है ना कि जिसने who has done that offense and about to do this, तो उसमें से किसी ने वो कुछ किया नहीं, और ना ही कोई आग का कोई केस मिला मुझे वहाँ मेरे एरिया में। तो ये बहुत ही इफेक्टिव रहा। थैंक यू सर, मुझे यही बोलना था।
ओके, थैंक यू मेनका।
Very good. I think
सर
that's
ये
sorry. Yeah, I think, can I say something?
ऑफ कोर्स सर।
तो मैं समझ रहा हूँ कि ये जो मनका ने एग्जाम्पल दिया और बात करी है बहुत अच्छा है और बड़ी इम्पोर्टेंट इशू है। और इनका एक्सपीरियंस अच्छा रहा है जब इन्होंने लोगों को कुछ अथॉरिटी दी है, कुछ कुछ रोल दिया है, कुछ उनको उनको लगा कि यार हम भी कुछ कर सकते हैं और हम यू नो मेक देम फील इम्पोर्टेंट। आई थिंक दैट ये एक बड़ा अच्छा उदाहरण है। और मैं सिर्फ यही कहूँगा कि आप इसको दोहराइए और जगह भी करो, मगर जब आप ये सब कुछ करो तो इसके बारे में लिखिए, डॉक्यूमेंट करो, पूरी कहानी लिखो, जितनी डिटेल लिख सकते हो लिखिए। ये डॉक्यूमेंटेशन बन जाएगी तो बहुत लोगों तक पहुंच सकती है, बहुत रहेगी लंबे अरसे तक, और बहुत इसको लोग इस्तेमाल करेंगे, कोट करेंगे, रिफर करेंगे। इन्हीं चीजों से आगे रिसर्च भी कर सकते हैं और नए तरीके निकल सकते हैं लोगों को फायर फाइटिंग में जोड़ने के। तो प्लीज ये करिए और मैं बड़ा खुश हूँगा। आप मेरा ईमेल आईडी ले लें अगर आप ये कहानियां मेरे को ईमेल करके भेज दो। थैंक यू।
ओके सर, थैंक यू।
एक जो है ये चैट भी आई है, इसमें विनय है हमारे फॉरेस्ट गार्ड, उन्होंने रिप्लाई किया है कि वेरी नॉलेजेबल लेक्चर सर, थैंक यू फॉर शेयरिंग योर वैल्यूएबल थॉट्स।
ओके, थैंक यू टू।
Thank you, sir.
राइट।
विनय कोई प्रश्न पूछना चाह रहे हैं आप?
सॉरी,
यस सर, मेरा एक क्वेश्चन था सर। थैंक यू सर।
बोलिए।
सर, मैं शक्ति जो सैंज वैली में एक जगह है, वहाँ पे मैं फॉरेस्ट गार्ड हूँ सर, नेशनल पार्क में सर। तो वहाँ पे मैं पिछले 5 सालों से ग्रैंडाला एक जो पक्षी है उसको देख रहा था सर। तो 2017 और 18 में मैंने उसकी अच्छी पॉपुलेशन विंटर के टाइम वहाँ पर जो पेड़ है, छरमा के पेड़, हिपोपी सेलेसिफोलिया के पेड़ जो हैं, उन पे जो बेरी लगती है उनको वो विंटर्स में बर्फ के टाइम खाने आती थी। तो पिछले 3 सालों में ऐसा हुआ है कि वो पिछले 3 में से 2 सालों में नहीं आई है और कम आई है। और इस साल सर जनवरी और फरवरी में वो आई है, पर कम आई है इस बार भी। और उनकी जगह ले ली है कलीज फीजेंट ने। उन्हीं पेड़ों पे चढ़ के काफी कलीज फीजेंट के झुंड जो है उस बेरी को खा रहे हैं सर। तो इससे क्या समझना चाहिए सर? मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था, क्लाइमेट से रिलेटेड है सर ये क्वेश्चन।
Okay, can you just briefly repeat what is being said?
सर
What is the
ये विनय है
issue?
सर, फॉरेस्ट गार्ड हैं ये, सेंज घाटी में ऊपर काम करते हैं सर। चाकटी करके एक गांव है सर ऊपर, जहाँ पे सड़क नहीं है। अप्रोक्सीमेटली 10 किलोमीटर दूर है सर, वो 10 से 13 किलोमीटर के आसपास होगा।
हाँ,
तो वहां पर सर वो जिसको हम सीबक थॉर्न कहते हैं सर, सीबक थॉर्न के पेड़ हैं सर,
हाँ, हाँ, हाँ,
हिपोफी
carry on.
सेलिसिफोलिया,
हाँ, जी, जी,
सेलिसिफोलिया के मतलब से सेलिक्स के जैसे लगते हैं सर। तो इन्होंने ये कहा सर कि मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि मैं उसको देखता था वहां पर, ग्रेंडाला करके एक बर्ड है, वो पिछले 3 सालों से आ रही थी। उसका नंबर जो है धीरे धीरे कुछ कम हो गया। और उन पेड़ों के ऊपर जो है, जो उसकी बेरीज जो होती हैं ऑरेंज कलर की, उसको इस बार देखा गया तो कलीज फिजेंट जो है वो उसके ऊपर ज्यादा फीड करता हुआ देखा गया।
अच्छा,
तो क्या हम इसको क्लाइमेट चेंज से जोड़कर देख सकते हैं? अक्सर ये ग्रैंडाला सर ऊपर लाहौल स्पीति वाली साइड में, ज्यादा ठंडे इलाके वाली जगह में होता है सर,
हाँ,
और ये बड़े झुंड में होता है सर।
हाँ। तो देखिए, आप अगर आप जो आपने देखा है और ऑब्जर्व किया है, अगर आप इसको लिख पाए, और आपके पास ईमेल तो होगी,
यस सर।
तो अगर आप इसके लिखें और कुछ फोटोज लगा के इसको जो कहानी ईमेल करें, जितने भी लोगों को आप कर सकते हैं, आप GHNP में मंडोत्रा साहब को ईमेल करें और ये 100 लोगों को आगे भेज सकते हैं, और आपको एक हफ्ते के अंदर इतना अच्छा फीडबैक आएगा आपकी मेल पर, बहुत लोगों से, बाहर से भी, तिब्बत से भी, जो घर माना जाता है शर्मा का, तिब्बतौन का। तो आपको नई बहुत जानकारी बढ़ेगी, मगर आपको एक अच्छा असेसमेंट हो जाएगी कि क्या चीज जो हो रहा है क्लाइमेट चेंज से जुड़ा है और क्या नहीं जुड़ा है, क्या किसी और वजह से हो रहा है। तो फिलहाल मेरा ये सुझाव यही है कि आप इसको ठीक तरह लिखिए। आपके पास फोटोज हैं, नहीं हैं तो उनको फोटो लेके अटैच करिए, एक डॉक्यूमेंट बनाइए और जितने लोगों को ईमेल कर सकते हो करिए, और फीडबैक के लिए, और आपको जरूर फीडबैक मिलेगा। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सर। थैंक यू सर।
तो मेरे हिसाब से और कोई क्वेश्चन है किसी का? मेरे हिसाब से सर और कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है, तो मेरे ख्याल से अब हम कंक्लूड कर सकते हैं सर आज का जो टॉक है।
ऑल राइट, प्लीज।
राइट सर, सो सर बताएंगे सर, कुछ बताना चाह रहे हैं, कुछ और भी बताना चाह रहे हैं सर?
You are going to sum it up, na?
यस सर, यस सर, यस सर।
Please go ahead.
सर
Go ahead.
बिल्कुल सर, बिल्कुल सर, बिल्कुल सर। सर तो मैं एक बार फिर से सर धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगा सर, आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद कहना चाहूंगा सर। हमने मतलब मेरे ख्याल से आपको 10 साल से ज्यादा रिटायरमेंट का हो चुका है एचपी फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट से, पर हम आज भी सर आपकी जो जो आपने काम किया है उसके बारे में सुनते हैं सर। हमने सुना है कि आपने नर्सरी के ऊपर बहुत फोकस रखा सर, आपने टॉल प्लांट्स के ऊपर बहुत ज्यादा काम किया और पूरे के स्टाफ को काफी मोटिवेट किया सर। और हमने ये भी सुना सर कि आपने जो है उस समय की जनरेशन जो थी, उस समय के जो फॉरेस्ट गार्ड्स थे जो कि नए नए ट्रेनिंग में आए थे, उन लोगों को काफी मोटिवेट किया कि आप कंप्यूटर सीखें, लैपटॉप लें और ज्यादा से ज्यादा नई टेक्नोलॉजी में एडवांसमेंट लें। और मेरे ख्याल से लोगों ने काफी उसको अडॉप्ट भी किया, इसीलिए आज तक अगर हम सुन रहे हैं अगले 10 साल हो चुके हैं, दैट मीन्स इट हैज लेफ्ट सम इम्पैक्ट। तो हम बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाह रहे हैं सर आपका। मैं सम अप करना चाहूंगा कि आपने जो क्लाइमेट रेजिलियंट के ऊपर बनने के ऊपर जो बताया, जो आपने इन्वेजिव एलियन स्पीशीज, फॉरेस्ट्री में वाटर रिचार्ज, इंपॉर्टेंस ऑफ डॉक्यूमेंटेशन, नर्सरीज, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, कम्युनिटी एंगेजमेंट, स्टाफ स्किल अपग्रेडेशन एटसेट्रा सर, इतने सारे टॉपिक्स के बारे में आपने अपने व्यूज रखे सर। हम आपके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद है सर। हम है कि जो ने इसका बहुत बहुत अच्छे से फायदा उठाया एंड दे हैव बीन एनलाइटेंड बाय इट, और जो आपने क्वेरीज जो हैं उनको भी बड़े अच्छे से आंसर किया। हम आपके बहुत बहुत शुक्रगुजार हैं सर। उम्मीद है सर 25-26 को भी आप बड़े अच्छे से हमें एनलाइटन करेंगे सर। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर।
Thank you.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर।
Okay.